Out here on the long highways of America, the road keeps its own secrets. Miles of dust, wind, and memory, where a man's thoughts grow louder than the radio and the dark can feel almost alive. Tonight, on No Name, we travel through one of those roads. Route 50, the loneliest stretch of asphalt in the country, a place where time moves strange and where one trucker learned that the past doesn't stay buried just because you keep driving. So settle in, turn down the lights, and remember, the road listens even when you think you're alone. They call Route 50 the loneliest road in America, and they aren't wrong. There's something about that stretch through Nevada that eats at you if you drive it alone long enough. No radio chatter, no headlights in the mirror, just the wind howling through sagebrush, the hum of the tires, and the occasional flicker of a road sign half swallowed by dust. My name's Earl Mason, 48 years old, been driving rigs since I was 21. I've hauled freight through snow, tornadoes, and places most people don't even know exist. But there's one trip, one stretch of highway, I still can't drive through without my chest tightening a little. It happened 2 summers ago, somewhere between Fallon and Ely. I remember that evening because the light was strange. The desert sky had that metallic hue, not sunset, not night, just a dull copper glow that made everything look half dead. I just fueled up outside of Austin, Nevada. The kind of town where you can walk its length in 3 minutes and still feel like you missed something. I had a reefer load of produce bound for Salt Lake City. Tight schedule, no time to waste. But the dispatch didn't warn me about the silence. There's a silence out there that isn't natural, a kind of hunger in the air, like the land itself wants to swallow you whole. About 40 miles out, I saw her for the first time. A hitchhiker. She was standing by the shoulder, one arm out, the other clutching a canvas duffel. Jeans, flannel shirt, hair tied up under a cap. At first glance, she looked like anyone you'd see trying to get to the next town. Except for one thing. She didn't move when my headlights hit her. Didn't even flinch. Just stood there, eyes fixed on the road, as if she wasn't really seeing me. I passed her doing 60. Didn't stop. Most truckers don't. You pick up the wrong stranger and you might not live to regret it. But for some reason that face stuck with me. She looked lost. Not the kind of lost that means I need a ride, but the kind that means I don't know where I am anymore. I remember checking my side mirror after I passed. She was still there. But just before the mirror faded her out, I thought I saw her turn her head toward me. Slow, deliberate, almost like she recognized me. I drove another 50 miles before I started telling myself stories to pass the time. It's something we all do, anything to fill the noise of the road. But every now and then I'd glance at the passenger seat. Empty, of course. Still, the thought kept pressing at me. Why did she look familiar? Then an hour later I saw her again. Same woman, same clothes, same duffel bag, standing by a broken fence at mile marker 106. That was impossible. There wasn't a single turnoff between the 2 spots. No cars, no houses, no side roads. Even if someone had picked her up, there's no way she could have beaten me there. For a moment, I told myself it had to be another person. Same clothes, similar build, a trick of the lights. But deep down, I knew better. The way she stood, still as a post, head tilted slightly toward the west, it was identical. My throat went dry. I eased off the gas but didn't stop. By the time I hit Ely, I was gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I parked behind a diner, one of those all-night places that smells like burnt coffee and bleach, and went in for a cup. The waitress was an older woman, maybe in her 60s. She'd seen enough drivers to spot one unraveling from a mile away. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, setting the mug down. "Just the road playing tricks?" I muttered. "On 50? It'll do that," she said, leaning on the counter. "Folks call it haunted. You ain't the first to see something you shouldn't." I tried to laugh it off, but it came out wrong. "You ever hear about a hitchhiker out there? A woman, mid-30s maybe?" The waitress frowned. "Lots of them used to hitch through here. Some never made it. State troopers pulled a car out of the salt flats a few years back. Driver said he was picking up a woman out there, swerved to avoid her, They found his rig upside down. Nobody in it. I didn't finish my coffee. When I got back in the cab, the air felt different, thicker, the kind of stillness that makes you feel like the world's holding its breath. I turned the key, engine roared, gauges lit up, and I told myself I'd laugh about this tomorrow. But an hour later, that promise died, because she was back. I saw her again just past Ely, right before the mountains swallowed the last of the light. She was standing in the exact same posture, one arm out, eyes blank. But this time, I swear she moved. Not much, just a small step toward the center of the lane as I approached. And in that split second before I passed her, the beam of my headlights hit her face, pale, wind-burned, streaked with dirt, and she smiled. Not the kind of smile that says, "Thank you for noticing me." It was the kind that says you should have stopped when you had the chance. I drove the rest of the night with the lights of the dash burning holes into my eyes. Every sound, every rattle of the trailer, every groan of the tires felt like someone whispering behind me. I checked my mirrors so many times I started to see faces where there weren't any. By dawn, I was shaking from exhaustion. Pulled off at a rest area, shut the engine down, and sat there staring at the windshield like it could answer me. Nothing but sand and sagebrush. I thought about calling dispatch, maybe telling them I wasn't feeling right. But you don't do that when you've been driving for nearly 30 years. You keep going, you handle your own ghosts. And yet, as I reached for my thermos, I caught something in the reflection of the chrome handle. Movement. A figure behind me, faint, like heat shimmer. By the time I turned around, the cab was empty. I told myself I was sleep-deprived, that's all. But when I started the engine and pulled back onto Route 50, I noticed something written in the dust on my passenger side window. I sat there for a long time, staring at those words. "Don't leave me again." At first, I figured it was just a prank. Someone scrawled it while I was inside the diner, or maybe a rest stop kid messing around. But the way it was written, the letters were drawn with a fingertip through the dust, slow and deliberate, like someone took their time. And the worst part, the dust was on the inside of the glass. I wiped it clean, turned the defrost on full blast, and tried to laugh it off. But it didn't leave my mind. Not for a mile, not for 100. You drive long enough and your truck starts to feel like a living thing. You learn every vibration, every creak, every click of the cooling engine. But that morning, the sound was wrong. The reefer unit kept cutting in and out. Not enough to trip the alarm, just enough to break the rhythm. And between those stops, in the dead silence, I swore I could hear breathing. I told myself I was tired, too much coffee, not enough sleep. But something in me, something I hadn't felt since I was a kid, started to wake up. That cold knot in the stomach, that old, dumb fear that the dark could see you. By midday, I was back in the high desert, that endless ribbon of asphalt winding between ridges and salt flats. The horizon shimmered like it was underwater. I hadn't seen another car in almost 2 hours. Then, up ahead, I saw movement. For a moment, I thought it was heat haze again. But no, there she was. Same hitchhiker, standing by a mile marker that read 172. Same clothes, same posture. I hit the brakes without even realizing it. The rig slowed, air brakes sighing. Part of me, the part that still believed in reason, wanted to drive on. But another part, deeper and quieter, whispered, "What if she needs help?" That same part that gets you killed when you second-guess your instincts. I rolled to a stop 20 feet past her. For a second, I didn't move, just stared in the mirror, waiting. She didn't. Finally, I leaned over, cracked the passenger door open a few inches, and called out, "Hey, you need a ride?" No response. She didn't even turn her head, just kept staring straight ahead, the desert wind tugging her flannel shirt. I started to reach for the handle, then stopped. Because in that moment, I caught a glimpse of her reflection in my side mirror. And in the reflection, she was looking at me. But her eyes, they weren't on the truck. They were on me. Directly. And she was mouthing something. I couldn't hear it. Engine noise, wind. But I could read the shape of her lips, the same words written in the dust. "Don't leave me again." That was enough. I slammed the door, threw it in gear, and got the hell out of there. By the time I hit the Utah border, the sun was sinking low, turning the desert blood orange. And I started to think about something I hadn't thought of in years. Her. Not her, the hitchhiker, but someone else. A woman I'd known a long time ago. Her name was Marlene. Back when I was 25, we ran loads together for about a year. She drove her own rig. Sharp, stubborn, never asked for help. We weren't a couple, not exactly, but we were close. Too close, maybe. One night in a rainstorm outside of Tonopah, we argued. I said something I shouldn't have. She walked out, angry, said she'd catch another ride east. Next morning, they found her truck off the shoulder, rolled twice, caught fire. They said she must have dozed off, but I always wondered if she was trying to find me again. I didn't go to the funeral. Couldn't. And now, driving that same stretch of Nevada road, I couldn't shake the thought. What if this wasn't some random hitchhiker at all? The idea made no sense, but sense didn't matter anymore. I hadn't slept properly in 2 days. My mind was looping between exhaustion and memory, replaying every word we'd said that night. The sound of her voice, the flash of her taillights fading in the rain. That's when the CB crackled to life. Breaker 19, you out there eastbound? I grabbed the mic, startled. Go ahead, driver. I seen you back there hauling that reefer. You all right? You looking kind of squirrely when you passed me near Ely. Relief flooded through me. Another human voice, finally. Yeah, I'm fine, I said. Just been a long haul, didn't sleep much. He chuckled. Ain't that the truth? You headed to Salt Lake? Yeah, a pause, then his voice changed, quieter. You seen her too, didn't ya? The air left my lungs. What do you mean? That woman, he said, out there by the posts. Been seeing her all week, always the same. Arm out, never waves. Couple drivers said she talks to him in their sleep. I gripped the mic tighter. What are you talking about? I don't know, man, he said. Some say she's from an old wreck back in '98. Some say she's just the desert itself, taken the shape of whoever you left behind. Then the line went dead. I tried hailing him again, but all I got was static. Not the normal kind, not white noise, but a pulsing, rhythmic hiss like breathing through a mask. That night, I stopped at a rest area outside Delta, Utah. One flickering light, a single trash can, and a bathroom that looked like it hadn't seen a mop in 20 years. I was too tired to care. I parked the rig, locked up, and climbed into the sleeper. Just needed an hour, I told myself. Just 1 hour of rest. But I didn't sleep. Not really. I drifted, half awake, half dreaming, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. And somewhere in that haze between sleep and thought, I heard the passenger door open. Not slam, not creak, just open. Soft. Careful. I froze. Didn't move, didn't breathe. Footsteps. Slow ones. Crossing the floor of the cab, then stopping near the bunk. The smell hit me next. Damp earth. Gasoline. And something burnt. A smell I'd tried to forget for 20 years. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. Then a hand, cold, calloused, brushed my shoulder, and a voice, low and close, said, You left me there, Earl. The air in my lungs turned to stone. My mind went white. I tried to move, to sit up, to scream, but I couldn't. The weight of her hand felt real, the warmth of her breath on my neck even more so. You left me, she whispered again, and I waited. I finally jerked upright, gasping, and the bunk light snapped on. No one was there. Passenger door locked, nothing but silence. But when I looked down at the dashboard, there was something lying on it. A faded photo, water-damaged, edges curled. Me and Marlene, standing beside our rigs, arms slung around each other, grinning like fools, and scrawled across the back in black ink almost washed away by time. Don't leave me again. I sat there in the sleeper, the photo trembling in my hand, the hum of the truck filling the air like static. The picture was old. I could tell by the paper stock, the faded colors, but I hadn't seen it in 20 years. I'd burned every copy I had after Marlene's accident. I remember that night clear as day, the sound of the rain hammering on the windshield, the way her voice cracked when she said, You don't listen, Earl. You only run. And she was right. I'd spent my whole life running. That photo shouldn't have been there. No one knew where I was parked. The cab was locked. And yet there it was, sitting on the dash like it had been waiting for me all along. I stared at it for so long that the edges of the world started to blur. Then I caught movement out the windshield. A figure standing just past the glow of the parking light. Still. Silent. Watching. I felt the same pull in my gut I'd felt every time I saw her, that whisper between reason and madness, but this time I didn't start the engine. Didn't run. Instead, I climbed down from the cab, boots hitting the gravel with a crunch that echoed too loud in the still air. The desert was cold, colder than it should have been for that time of year. The kind of cold that comes from inside you. She didn't move as I walked closer. Didn't speak. Just stared. The light caught her face. Dirt, windburn, the faintest cut on her cheek, and for a heartbeat I could almost believe she was real. Her eyes found mine, and for the first time, she smiled. Not the eerie one from before. This was softer, sad, like she'd been waiting for me to finally stop running. I stopped a few feet away, my voice barely working. "Marlene?" She tilted her head, a small, almost human motion, and then, in a voice like wind moving through dry grass, she said, "It's just the road now, Earl, but it remembers." The light flickered, and in that flicker she was gone. I stood there a long time, staring at the empty road. Just the desert again. Flat, endless, quiet. I don't know how long I stood before climbing back in the truck. When I did, the cab smelled faintly of smoke, like diesel and rain. I sat behind the wheel, hands trembling, the photo still on the dash, and for the first time in years, I said her name out loud. "Marlene, I'm sorry." The wind outside rose, brushing against the mirrors, and for a heartbeat, I thought I heard her answer, a sigh, a whisper, then silence. I drove east through the night. The world beyond the windshield felt endless, the asphalt cutting through the desert like a scar. But something had shifted inside me. The fear was still there, sure, but underneath it was something else. A kind of release. Maybe that's all ghosts are. The pieces of us we try to bury. The guilt we never face. The words we should have said when someone was still listening. By dawn, the salt flats had turned to gold beneath the rising sun. I rolled down the window, letting the cold morning air flood the cab. It smelled clean, like metal, sage, and light. At a diner just outside Delta, I stopped for breakfast. A couple of other drivers were there trading stories over coffee. One of them, a kid, maybe late 20s, looked up and nodded toward my rig outside. "You coming through 50?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. He grinned. "You see her?" I met his eyes. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I saw her." He chuckled, like it was just a ghost story between drivers. "Man, everyone talks about that hitchhiker. You think she's real?" I thought about it. About the way she'd looked at me, the photo, the words on the glass, about how, for the first time in years, I wasn't running from the past. "I think," I said slowly, "the road keeps what we leave behind, whether we want it to or not." He didn't know what to say to that, and I didn't blame him. Some stories aren't for telling, they're just for carrying. When I got back in the truck, I looked at the passenger seat. The photo was gone. But the dust on the dashboard had settled into a faint outline, a handprint, small, weathered, and underneath it, barely visible in the morning light, the words again. "It's okay now." I sat there for a while, just breathing, letting the hum of the idling engine steady me. Then I eased the rig back onto Route 50, heading east. The road stretched on, long, straight, endless. But it didn't feel as empty anymore. It felt like it had forgiven me. And somewhere in the distance, between the flicker of mirage and memory, I thought I saw her one last time. Not standing. Not waiting. Just walking away from the highway toward the horizon. The sun was climbing higher, burning the fog out of the valleys. The sky turned that sharp Nevada blue that only comes after a long night of doubt. And I realized something I'd forgotten after all these years behind the wheel. Sometimes redemption doesn't come from saving someone else. It comes from finally facing what you left behind and learning to drive forward, even when the road never forgets. I turned the CB back on. Static at first, then a familiar voice, some driver cracking a joke about gas prices, another asking about weather near Wendover. Ordinary life returning. And I joined in, like nothing had happened. "Breaker 19, I said, my voice steady. "This is Mason. Eastbound out of Delta, clear skies ahead. And as I said it, I realized I meant it. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the road. Not of the dark stretches, not of the empty miles, not even of the things that still whispered at the edges of memory. The road gives, the road takes, but it always tells the truth. Eventually. And if you listen close enough, sometimes it even forgives. Sometimes it isn't the miles that wear you down, it's the ghosts you bring with you. Out on Route 50, Earl Mason didn't just face the road, he faced himself. Maybe that's what the loneliest places are for, not punishment, but forgiveness. If stories like this keep you thinking long after the engine stops, then you belong here with us. This is No Name, where the road never ends and every mile tells a story. Tell me, have you ever seen something out there that you can't explain? Share your story in the comments. And if you want to ride along next time, hit that subscribe button and keep your lights on. The next road might be darker than you think. I've been driving for 27 years, and I've learned one thing about the road. It remembers what you try to forget. Names, faces, voices over the radio, they fade, but the road holds them like ghosts pressed under asphalt. My name's Earl Harper, 51 years old, based out of Topeka, Kansas. I've hauled everything from frozen meat to aircraft parts, and I've seen all the small things that wear a man down. Sleep deprivation, loneliness, and the slow erosion of trust. That summer of '98, I was on a run from Denver to St. Louis, hauling auto parts in an old Kenworth that rattled like a dying animal. The job was easy enough. Long hours, hot days, and too many cups of truck stop coffee that tasted like copper. It was August. The heat shimmered above the asphalt, and the air itself felt tired. I hadn't slept right in 3 days. Dispatch kept pushing me to meet a schedule that didn't make sense. You start to think strange things when you're alone too long with an engine growling beneath you. The road hums a rhythm, and after a while, that rhythm starts talking back. By the time the sun sank behind the fields, my eyes burned. I remember checking the map, a fold-out Rand McNally, and noting I was about 20 miles east of a small town called Clayton Ridge. Never heard of it before. According to the map, the next rest area was still 60 miles out. I didn't have it in me. So when I saw a green highway sign that read, "Rest Stop, 1 mile," it felt like salvation. Funny thing, though, I don't remember passing that sign on the way west earlier that week. Still, I slowed down, flicked on my right turn signal, and eased into the exit ramp. It was one of those old rest stops, no lights except for a weak yellow bulb above a vending machine shelter. A couple of wooden picnic tables, a payphone booth, and one beat-up trash can that looked like it hadn't been emptied since spring. No other trucks, no cars, just crickets and the distant groan of the highway. I parked near the end of the lot, killed the engine, and let the silence collapse around me. The air smelled like wet concrete, even though it hadn't rained. I climbed down, stretched, and looked around. The rest stop was small, barely enough space for 3 rigs. Beyond it, the land rolled flat into darkness. No houses, no streetlights, just miles of black fields. I checked the vending machine. The glass was fogged, but inside were a few candy bars and a couple of sodas that looked ancient. I dropped a coin in, pressed for a Coke, and the can thudded down. When I cracked it open, it was warm. That's when I noticed something. No restroom building. Usually, even the smallest rest areas have a concrete restroom or at least a pit toilet. But here, there was just the vending shelter and a small maintenance shed at the far end. The shed door was slightly open, a sliver of darkness inside. I figured maybe the bathrooms were in there, though it didn't make much sense. I called out, "Hello," but my voice sounded wrong, like the air swallowed it. No answer. I was too tired to care, so I walked back to the truck, climbed in, and decided to grab a few hours sleep before heading out again. I remember looking at the clock, 10:47 p.m., and thinking I'd drive out before dawn. The cab was hot, the seat sticking to my back, and I left the windows cracked. That's when the knocking started. Soft, deliberate on the passenger side door. I froze. It was that unmistakable sound, the flat part of a hand tapping metal. Not hard enough to demand attention, but steady, like someone didn't want to wake me, only to remind me they were there. I turned on the dome light and looked. Nothing. The rest stop outside was empty, just shadows, the vending machine light buzzing faintly. I waited, listening. Maybe a branch had hit the side, though there weren't any trees close enough. Then the knock came again. 3 slow taps. I grabbed the flashlight from the dash and swung the beam toward the window. The glass caught a faint reflection, maybe a shape, but I couldn't tell if it was outside or my own tired face looking back. The knocking stopped. I sat there breathing, waiting for something to move, but nothing did. Finally, I laughed under my breath, more out of exhaustion than courage. "You're losing it, Earl," I muttered. "You're just damn tired." I turned off the light, leaned back, and closed my eyes. I must have drifted off because the next thing I remember was waking up cold. The night air had changed, sharper, damp. The sound of the crickets was gone. Dead silence. I glanced at the clock. 3:02 a.m. The vending machine light was out. The whole place was pitch black except for my headlight's faint reflection in the side mirror. Then I noticed something that made my stomach twist. In the mirror, the maintenance shed door was closed. I stared at it for a while, trying to remember if I'd shut it earlier. I didn't think I had. The unease crawled up slowly, not fear exactly, just a kind of awareness that I wasn't alone. I decided to start the engine, get out of there, find a lit truck stop somewhere down the line. I turned the key, the starter clicked, once, twice, again, dead battery. The silence that followed was unbearable. That's when the CB radio crackled, even though I hadn't touched it since Amarillo. A faint voice came through, breaking in and out under static. "You there? Harper." I froze. Nobody calls you by your last name on the CB. I grabbed the mic. "Who's this?" Static. Then the same voice, quieter. "You shouldn't have stopped here." The radio went dead. I sat perfectly still, my hand tight on the mic. The hair on my arms stood up. I scanned the lot again, nothing but darkness. I reached for my flashlight, stepped out of the cab, and the air hit me, cold and heavy like stepping underwater. The sky was clouded over, no moon, no stars. I called out again, "Hello? You need help?" No answer. But then I heard it, a faint metallic rattle coming from the direction of the shed. Not constant, just one short sound, like a latch shifting in the wind. I started walking that way, light trembling in my hand. My boots scuffed the gravel, every sound unnaturally loud. The closer I got, the colder it felt. When I reached the shed, I saw the padlock hanging open. I aimed the beam inside, nothing but shelves, some tools, and a mop bucket filled with water. And then on the inside of the door, I saw fresh scratches. Long parallel lines carved deep into the wood like someone had tried to claw their way out. My chest tightened. The air smelled metallic like old blood or rust. I stepped back, heart pounding, and almost tripped on something in the dirt. A small road atlas, half buried, cover torn off. I brushed the dirt away, opened it. Every page was blank. The sound came again, the knocking. But this time it was from my truck. 3 soft taps, exactly the same rhythm. The sound froze me in place. 3 taps. Pause. Then 2 more. Slower this time, deliberate. I swung the flashlight toward the truck, but the beam caught only the chrome side mirror and the faint shimmer of condensation across the windshield. My rig looked different in the dark. Its shape distorted, angles too sharp, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I took a breath, steadying myself. "Just some kid messing around," I said out loud, though I knew that was impossible. I hadn't seen a car for hours. I walked back toward the cab, boots crunching on gravel. My own footsteps echoed louder than they should have. The air felt thicker, every breath scraping against my throat. When I reached the truck, I paused by the door and listened. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the idling highway, far off beyond the trees. I clicked the flashlight off to see better, let my eyes adjust to the dark. That's when I saw it, a handprint on the passenger window. Small, child-sized. The outline smeared as if pressed there moments ago. I touched the glass, it was wet, but the air was bone dry. I stepped back, scanning the lot again. My own shadow stretched thin across the pavement under the distant glow of my parking lights. There was no movement, No sign of life, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not from a distance, but close, right beside me. Something about the silence pressed in from all directions. It wasn't empty. It was full of something waiting. I climbed back into the cab, slammed the door, and locked it. My breathing sounded too loud inside the small space. The smell of diesel, sweat, and warm metal mixed together, clinging to the air like a warning. I turned the ignition again. The starter barely groaned this time, just a faint click, then dead silence. I flicked on the CB, hoping maybe I could reach someone on Channel 19. Breaker 19. Anyone copy? Got a dead rig near mile marker 212 eastbound. Anyone out there? Static. Then a faint voice bled through, distant, warped, like a recording played backward. You shouldn't be here. Then nothing. Just a low hiss that faded into silence. I switched the channel, tried again. No response. That's when I saw movement in the side mirror, just a flicker at the edge, something dark crossing behind the trailer. I leaned forward, eyes narrowing, but there was nothing there. No footsteps. No sound. Earl, I muttered. You're just seeing things. You need sleep. That's all. But then came the knock, one final time, louder now, from the back of the trailer. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped outside again. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. The night air bit colder than before, and there was a low mist crawling across the asphalt. I walked around the side of the trailer, shining the light along its length. The beam caught the reflective stripes, silver and red, slicing through the fog. Then I stopped. At the rear of the trailer, both cargo doors were unlatched. I knew for certain I'd sealed them before leaving Denver. Checked twice. Even signed the load sheet myself. Now they hung slightly open, maybe an inch. The mist seemed thicker there, swirling around the gap like breath. I reached for the latch, but something inside the dark space shifted. A faint hollow shuffle, like a box sliding across metal. I froze. Who's in there? My voice cracked, breaking the still air. You need to come out. Nothing. Then another sound, slow dragging, the scrape of something heavy being pulled along the floor. Every instinct told me to run, but exhaustion and confusion had dulled that part of my brain. Instead, I lifted the latch, pulled one door open. The beam cut across the interior, rows of strapped crates tied down like always. Nothing moved, but the smell hit me. Wet soil. Strong, earthy, as if someone had dug a grave inside the trailer. I stepped up, shining the light between the boxes. There, against the front wall, was a small pile of dirt, fresh. And something else, footprints. Bare, small, leading toward the corner and vanishing under one of the crates. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. My hands slipped and the flashlight clattered to the floor, beam spinning wild across the metal walls. For a split second, I saw something standing in the far corner. Too small to be a man. I blinked, and it was gone. I grabbed the flashlight, backed out of the trailer, and slammed the doors shut. The latches clicked, echoing like gunshots. I stood there shaking, staring at the metal doors, my reflection warped across their surface. My mind was racing, logic fighting panic. There was no one there. It was a trick of exhaustion, shadows, dehydration. That's what I told myself. But the handprint, the voice, the dirt, none of it fit. I walked back toward the cab, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. When I opened the driver's door, I froze again. The atlas I'd found earlier, the blank one, was sitting open on the passenger seat. I hadn't brought it inside. And now there was something written on the first page. In small, uneven handwriting, "You've been here before." The letters looked pressed into the paper, not written with ink, but indented like they'd been carved with a nail or the edge of a key. I stared at the words, my mouth dry. I tried to remember every stop I'd made over the years, every quiet lot like this. There had been hundreds, nameless, empty, in-between places, but none of them felt like this one. I slammed the atlas shut, tossed it on the floor, and sat back in the seat. I kept the flashlight on, sweeping the lot through the windshield. The vending machine light flickered once, twice, then glowed steady again. It shouldn't have had power. A faint hum filled the air, rising like feedback from an unseen speaker. The static returned on the CB, louder now, layered with overlapping whispers. "Earl, you left the door open." My breath hitched. I turned toward the back window. The reflection of the trailer was there in the glass, both doors wide open again. I bolted out of the cab. When I rounded the corner, the fog was so thick I could barely see. The open trailer yawned black, cold air spilling out like breath. Inside, the dirt pile was gone. Only one thing remained: the road atlas lying on the metal floor, pages fluttering though there was no wind. And this time, the pages weren't blank. Each one showed the same image, a map of Kansas, but instead of highways, it was covered in names, hundreds of them, handwritten. Every page different, but one name repeated near the center of every map: Earl Harper. The sound of footsteps came from behind me, slow, measured, coming closer through the mist. I turned. The flashlight flickered, caught something pale moving just beyond its reach. A face, maybe, or the suggestion of one. The features were indistinct, blurred, but I could feel its eyes. Watching, recognizing. My voice cracked. "What do you want?" It didn't speak. It only knocked, 3 slow taps on the trailer wall beside me, and then silence. The air shifted and I realized I could see my breath. My skin prickled, every instinct screaming to leave, to drive, to get away. I ran back to the cab, slammed the door, turned the key one more time, and the engine roared to life on the first try. I didn't question it. I didn't look back. As I pulled onto the ramp and merged with the empty highway, I glanced once into the side mirror. The rest stop was gone. Just open fields, dark and endless, as if nothing had ever been there. The road stretched ahead, straight and silent. But in the hum of the engine, buried deep under the rumble, I could still hear it. Faint and rhythmic. 3 soft knocks from somewhere inside the cab. The knocks didn't stop. They came in threes, steady, like the sound of something trapped just beneath the floorboards. Then silence. Then again. Faint, but closer. I gripped the wheel tighter, every muscle locked. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the darkness ahead, the road stretching like a gray ribbon into infinity. The night around me was absolute. No stars, no taillights, no signs. Just the sound of the engine and the slow, rhythmic beat that kept echoing somewhere inside the truck. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. I turned up the radio, nothing but static. Switched the CB to every channel I could think of. Silence, then the faintest whisper. My name, drawn out like wind slipping through wires. "Earl." I slammed the CB off. I told myself it was mechanical, loose tools in the cab, something shifting in the trailer, but my mind wouldn't buy it. I could feel it. The sound had intention. Every mile I drove, the air seemed heavier. My chest ached. My eyes burned from exhaustion, but I was afraid to blink, afraid that when I opened them again, something would be sitting in the passenger seat. The clock on the dash flickered, jumped from 3:44 to 3:12, then went dark. I drove anyway. The miles rolled by with no landmarks, no exits, just road. I kept waiting for a sign, but there was nothing. After a while, the fuel gauge started to dip. I glanced at it and felt panic rise. I had filled up in Denver. There should have been another 300 miles in the tank. But the needle was sinking fast, as if the truck were bleeding it out. That's when I saw lights ahead, dim, yellowish, swaying in the mist. A gas station, or something pretending to be. The sign above the pumps flickered. Full service. Cold drinks, open 24 hours. The kind of old roadside station that looked straight out of the 60s, like it hadn't been touched in decades. I pulled in, gravel crunching under the tires. The pumps looked ancient, the kind with rolling number dials and faded red paint. There was a single car parked by the front door, an old Buick, dust-coated and missing a plate. I shut off the engine. The knocking stopped immediately. Inside, the station lights buzzed faintly. I could see through the glass, shelves lined with dusty cans, a register and a small counter, but no one inside. Still, the front door creaked open as if expecting me. The bell above it chimed once. The smell hit me, mildew and something sweet underneath, like rotting fruit. "Hello?" I called. My voice echoed off the walls. No answer. Then a man stepped out from the back room. He was tall, thin, maybe in his 60s, wearing a brown uniform shirt with a patch that read Frank's Service. His face looked drawn, gray in the fluorescent light. "Evening," he said, voice calm, almost kind. "You look tired, driver." "Yeah," I said. "Just need to fill up. My map says I'm near Clayton Ridge, but I can't find..." He smiled faintly. "Clayton Ridge is gone. Been gone a long time." I stared at him. "What do you mean, gone?" He shrugged. "Closed up after the flood, roads washed out, folks moved on. But the highway..." "There ain't been a highway through here in years," he said softly. The words landed wrong, like something in them wasn't meant for me to understand. I turned to look out the window. My truck sat under the lone canopy light, gleaming silver in the mist. For a second, it looked smaller, like a toy in the distance. "You got diesel?" I asked. He nodded toward the pump. "Sure do. You pay first." I reached for my wallet, handed him a 20. His hand was cold, unnaturally cold, and when he took the bill, it fluttered in his grip as if from a wind I couldn't feel. He rang up the sale on an old register. The drawer didn't open. He didn't seem to notice. "You've been driving a long time," he said. "You remember where you're coming from?" I hesitated. "Denver." He nodded slowly, eyes distant. "That's a long way off now." Something in his tone made me step back. The air around us felt warped, humming faintly like electricity behind the walls. I looked at the clock above the counter. The second hand was moving backward. "I should get going," I said. "Appreciate the help." He nodded again. "You take care, Earl." I froze. "How do you know my name?" He didn't answer, just smiled. Or maybe it wasn't a smile. When I turned back toward the door, the bell didn't ring this time. Outside, the fog had thickened into a wall. I could barely see the front of the truck. I climbed into the cab, turned the key, and the engine roared alive again, too easily, too fast. I put it in gear, pulled out of the lot, and watched the station fade in the mirror. For a long time, I drove in silence. No radio, no knocks, nothing. Just the hum of the tires and the faint whistle of air through the vents. Then, as the fog thinned, I saw the green highway sign appear up ahead. Rest stop. 1 mile. The same sign, same font, same bullet holes through the top corner. My stomach turned cold. I pressed the accelerator, but the needle didn't move. The road stayed flat, straight, and empty. Then a mile later, the exit appeared, the same cracked asphalt ramp leading up to the same small lot. The same vending machine, the same open shed, the same truck parked at the far end. For a second, my brain couldn't process it. Then I realized the truck was mine. Same color, same dent in the fender, same license plate. I slowed to a crawl, headlights sweeping across the lot. My heart hammered so hard I thought I'd pass out. The truck's headlights were off, but I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat, not moving. I pulled to the shoulder, engine idling, and stared through the windshield. My breath fogged the glass. The figure in the other truck looked exactly like me. Older, maybe. Paler. But the same jacket, same hat. He sat still, hands on the wheel, eyes fixed straight ahead. Then, slowly, he turned his head, just enough to look at me. And in that instant, I understood something I couldn't explain. That I had been driving in circles long before tonight. That every rest stop I'd ever pulled into, every nameless parking lot, every sleepless mile was part of the same road that didn't end. The radio crackled again, soft, broken words filtering through. "You shouldn't have stopped here." My own voice. I floored the accelerator. The engine screamed, but the truck barely moved. The road didn't change. The sign ahead flickered again, fading into the dark, until there was nothing but the hum of the tires and the endless gray stretch of asphalt. I don't know how long I drove. Hours, maybe days. Time lost shape. The fuel gauge never dropped past half. The clock on the dash stayed frozen at 3:02 a.m. Sometimes I still hear the knocks, faint, inside the sleeper, right behind where my head rests. Sometimes they wake me up before dawn, when the horizon looks the same in every direction. People ask me why I still drive, why I don't quit, settle down somewhere quiet. But the truth is, I don't know if there's anywhere else. The maps don't show the rest stop. They never did. But I've seen it, again and again, on nights when the fog rolls in and the radio starts whispering. And I know one day when the road decides I'm too tired to keep moving, I'll pull off again. I'll see the vending machine light, the open shed door, and maybe I'll finally stop fighting the direction it's been taking me all along, because some roads don't lead anywhere. They just keep you moving until you forget you were ever trying to get home. And some rest stops don't exist on any map because they're waiting for the drivers who never found their way off the highway. You spend enough nights on the road and you start to learn the language of the dark. It speaks in the hum of tires, the flicker of distant porch lights, the rhythm of your own heartbeat when the radio goes quiet. I've been driving for over 20 years now, mostly east of the Mississippi, and I've learned to keep my mind calm in the silence. But every so often, the road speaks back in ways that don't make sense, like it remembers something you've forgotten. My name's Ray McCullough, 54 years old when this happened. Born and raised in western Kentucky, hauling freight through the Appalachian corridor, mostly night runs between Roanoke and Charleston. The mountains out there are old, older than the bones of our country. They rise and fall like slow breaths under the fog, and there are nights when the clouds hang so low you feel like you're driving through someone's dream. It was late November of 1998. Cold, wet, the kind of chill that seeps through the cab no matter how high you crank the heat. I was hauling empty containers back from Virginia after a long week on the coast. The dispatcher offered me a motel stop, but I told him I'd push through, wanted to be home by morning. My wife had stopped waiting up years ago, but I still like pulling into my own driveway before dawn, smelling the wood smoke from the neighbors' chimneys, hearing my old dog bark once before going back to sleep. Somewhere past Paint Bank, Virginia, the fog thickened. The kind of fog that swallows headlights and gives you back your own reflection. I slowed to 40, then 35, just following the curve of the road by the faded white lines. The CB had gone quiet 2 hours back, and the only company I had was a late-night gospel station out of Charleston, soft organ music whispering about mercy and redemption. I don't scare easy. When you've seen cars wrapped around trees and black ice take a rig sideways, you learn that real danger doesn't announce itself. But that night, there was a kind of weight in the air, a stillness too deep, like the mountains were listening. I remember thinking it felt like driving through the memory of a place instead of the place itself. That's when I saw her. At first, I thought it was a trick of the fog, something white flickering by the roadside, half seen between the guardrail and the trees. Then the shape stepped closer, into the wash of my headlights. A woman, standing still right by the shoulder. Pale dress, maybe a coat. I couldn't tell in the mist. One hand raised slightly, like she was trying to flag someone down. I braked hard, tires hissing on the damp asphalt. My heart didn't race, but I remember my hands gripping the wheel too tight. There's a kind of instinct you develop after years on the road. You see a person out here after midnight, miles from anywhere, and something inside you hesitates, but she looked small, lost. Her hair dark and wet against her face. I couldn't just keep driving. I pulled over, hazard lights flashing weakly in the fog. The gospel station crackled as I turned the volume down. She didn't move at first, just stood there, half in shadow. I rolled down the passenger window and called out, "You all right, ma'am?" No answer. Just a faint breath of fog curling past her shoulder. I leaned over, unlocked the door, and said, "It's cold out there. You need a ride somewhere?" That seemed to break whatever spell held her. She stepped closer, slow, careful. I could see her face then, pale, maybe mid-20s, eyes hollowed from the cold. She had on a thin white dress, the kind you'd wear to church in spring, not in November. No coat, no bag. Her lips moved before any sound came out. "Are you heading toward Clifton Forge?" Her voice was soft, like she was afraid to use it. I nodded. "I can take you that far. Hop in." She climbed up into the cab without a word, folding her hands in her lap, staring straight ahead. The faint smell of rain and something else, flowers maybe, filled the cab. I shut the door, eased back onto the road. We drove in silence for a while. The wipers squeaked across the glass. She didn't shiver, didn't even glance my way, just stared into the fog as if she could see something out there that I couldn't. I tried to keep my voice light. "Pretty rough night to be walking. You break down somewhere?" She hesitated before answering. "No, I was waiting for someone." I smiled a little. "Out here? You must be patient." She didn't respond. The way she said it, though, was waiting, not am waiting, stuck in my mind. Her tone was flat, almost gentle, but there was an old kind of sadness behind it. The miles rolled on. I watched the temperature gauge hover just above freezing. The fog thinned now and then, revealing dark outlines of trees, then swallowed us again. The gospel music still murmured low, a man's voice repeating, "We are never lost, only led astray." At one point, she spoke again, barely louder than the hum of the engine. "Do you believe people can get stuck between one place and another?" I glanced at her. "You mean, like lost?" She turned to face me then, eyes glimmering in the dashlight. "No, not lost, just unable to leave." Something in her tone made the hairs on my arms rise. I didn't answer right away. The road curved sharply left, and I focused on the white line. "I guess anything's possible," I said finally. "Some folks get caught in the past. Others never make peace with it." She smiled faintly. "Yes, that sounds right." After that, she grew quiet again. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but I told myself maybe she'd been through an accident, maybe in shock. I'd picked up a few stranded folks before. Truckers do, though we don't always talk about it. You see the strangest sides of people in the dark. About 10 miles later, the fog broke completely. We came around a bend and the lights of Lowmore shimmered ahead. Small town, gas station, diner, and a couple of motels. I told her, "We'll be in Clifton Forge in about 15 minutes. You got someone there I can drop you to?" She didn't respond. I looked over. The seat was empty. No sound, no movement, just the faint indentation where she'd been sitting and the smell of rain and lilacs hanging in the air. I pulled over so hard the rig shuddered. My pulse finally caught up with me, a deep thud in my chest. I opened the passenger door, stepped out into the cold. The fog was gone now. Clear night, stars faint above the ridge. The road stretched empty in both directions. No footprints, no cars, just silence, deep as a confession. I must have stood there 5 full minutes, staring down the road, trying to breathe slow. I'm not a man prone to wild imagination, but she had been there. The seatbelt was still twisted, the air still carried her scent. I even found a few strands of dark hair caught against the seat fabric. It didn't make sense, but I knew what I'd seen. I drove the rest of the way to Clifton Forge with the radio off. Every sound in the cab seemed amplified. The rattle of coins, the shift of gears, my own heartbeat loud in my ears. By the time I pulled into the 24-hour diner on Main Street, I felt hollowed out, like I'd been driving through someone else's life. The waitress poured me coffee without asking. She was older, kind-eyed, said she hadn't seen me in a while. I told her what happened, just the simple version, that I'd picked up a woman who vanished before I reached town. The words sounded foolish even as I said them. But the way the waitress froze, coffee pot in midair, told me she'd heard something like it before. "You said she was wearing white?" she asked quietly. I nodded. Her eyes softened, almost pitying. "Honey, you might have seen Annie Garver." The name didn't mean anything to me. She sat across from me and lowered her voice. "That road you came down? She died there. Car wreck, maybe 30 years ago. Folks say she still tries to get home on foggy nights." I wanted to laugh it off, but I couldn't. The words lodged somewhere deep. I looked out the window at the road disappearing into the dark hills and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The waitress patted my hand gently. "If she rode with you, maybe she was finally ready to make it home." I didn't sleep that night. I rented a room above the diner, one of those old second-floor rooms with a thin mattress and floral curtains that haven't moved since the Carter administration. The place smelled faintly of fried food and old wallpaper glue. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her again, sitting there in the cab, hands folded, eyes fixed ahead into the fog. You'd think a man my age would know better than to chase ghosts, but I couldn't shake it. Something about her presence hadn't felt like terror. It was more like sorrow made visible. And when she asked that question about being stuck between one place and another, it felt like she wasn't talking just about herself. I lay there until dawn, staring at the ceiling fan that barely moved the air. Just before sunrise, I went downstairs. The diner was quiet, a few locals nursing coffee before heading to work. The same waitress from last night was there. She saw me and gave a small nod like she'd expected I'd still be around. "You look like you didn't rest," she said, setting down a mug in front of me. "Didn't feel right," I told her. "You mentioned that name, Annie Garver. What happened to her?" She sighed, folding her hands on the counter. "It was a long time ago. 68, I think. She was coming home from a dance in Covington. Car went off the ridge near Paint Bank. They found her 3 days later, washed up in a creek bed down by the bridge. Folks said she'd been trying to walk home in the fog. Her folks lived in Low Moor. That's where you saw her heading, wasn't it?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "That's where she disappeared." She nodded. "You're not the first. Every few years, someone passing through says they picked up a woman in white. Always the same story. Always around the same stretch of road." I stared into my coffee, watching the steam rise. I wanted to believe there was some logical explanation. Maybe I dozed off, imagined it. Maybe someone really had been there and jumped out when I wasn't looking. But that smell, the lilac scent, it had lingered in my cab like a signature. Too real to dismiss. The waitress poured herself a cup and joined me. "You know," she said, "most of the old folks around here don't think she's trying to scare anyone. They say she's looking for a way home, but she can't find it because the road keeps changing. The new highway cut right through where her daddy's house used to be." That detail sat heavy in my chest. I knew those back roads well enough to picture it. An old homestead buried under asphalt and rest stops, forgotten by everyone except one lost spirit walking through the fog. I left the diner a little after 7, heading back to my rig. The morning air was clear, the sky washed pale blue. The town looked harmless in daylight. Gas pumps gleaming, kids on bikes cutting across the street, a dog barking in the distance. Still, I felt watched somehow, like something unseen was waiting just past the horizon. I had a load to pick up in Charleston that afternoon, but instead of turning west, I found myself heading back the way I came, toward Paint Bank, toward the curve in the road where I'd stopped. It wasn't courage driving me. It was guilt. Some part of me felt like I'd left her there, unfinished, like I'd turned my back on someone who trusted me to take her home. The road wound through the mountains, frost melting on the guardrails. I slowed as I reached the stretch where I'd first seen her. The fog was gone, the trees still dripping with dew, and there, by the shoulder, stood a small wooden cross, weathered, half-collapsed, wrapped in plastic flowers that had long lost their color. Annie Garver. The name was carved faintly into the wood, along with the year. 1968. I parked the rig and sat there for a long time, engine idling softly. I thought about the girl in white, her quiet voice, the sadness in her eyes, and I thought about myself, how many miles I'd driven, how many nights I'd spent alone on empty roads. Maybe she wasn't the only one stuck between places. I stepped out and approached the cross. The air was colder here, damp with the smell of moss and rust. A crow called somewhere up the ridge. I knelt down, brushed away the fallen leaves, and found a small stone at the base, smooth and gray. Without really thinking, I picked and set it on top of the cross, something my grandmother used to do when visiting graves, a sign you'd been there, a promise not to forget. When I turned back toward the truck, I saw movement in the side mirror, a shape, faint, standing near the bend. White dress, still as frost. I froze. The rational part of my mind told me it was a trick of light, glare from the windshield, but I knew. She was watching, not accusing, not frightening, just there. I raised my hands slowly, a small gesture of acknowledgement. She didn't move. The morning wind rustled the trees, and then she was gone. I climbed back into the cab, sat behind the wheel, and felt an odd calm settle over me. The road stretched ahead, winding through sunlight and shadow. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the loneliness pressing on my chest. I turned on the engine and whispered, almost without realizing it, "You made it home, Annie." The miles rolled beneath me like quiet waves. I didn't stop until I reached Charleston that night. The dispatchers didn't notice anything different, and I didn't tell them. Some things you keep to yourself, but the road changed for me after that. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. Every time I drove through fog, I found myself listening, not for danger, but for her, for that faint, impossible voice asking whether people can get stuck between places. And sometimes, when the night was cold and the mountains breathed fog across the valleys, I thought I smelled lilacs again, soft, distant, fading. A few weeks later, I passed through Lowmore again. I stopped at the same diner, same booth. The waitress recognized me, smiled without surprise. "You look better," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "I think I just needed to make peace with something." She nodded, like she understood without needing details. Before I left, she pressed something into my hand, a small folded photograph. "Found this in an old newspaper clipping," she said. "Thought you might want it." It was a picture of Annie Garver smiling beside a car that looked older than I was. Same dark hair, same eyes. Alive, laughing, mid-twirl in a white dress. I kept that photo in my logbook after that. Sometimes I'd take it out when the road stretched too long or the silence got too heavy. It reminded me that maybe not all hauntings are meant to frighten us. Some are just echoes trying to be heard one last time. Because if there's one thing the road teaches you, it's that not everything that follows you wants to hurt you. Some just want to be remembered. And sometimes if you listen closely enough to the hum of the tires, to the whisper of the mountains, you realize you're not alone out there at all. They say the road keeps your secrets, but I've learned that out here in the Appalachian dark, nothing truly stays buried. Not the sound of a voice, not the smell of rain, not even the things you'd give your soul to forget. My name's Earl Mason, 48 years old, long-haul trucker since I was 19. Born and raised in western North Carolina, near the edge where the mountains start to breathe mist into the valleys. I've been on every major highway east of the Mississippi, slept in cabs and rest stops longer than I ever slept in a home. My life's been measured in mile markers, diesel fumes, and static-filled radio chatter. But this story, this one, it happened a few winters ago. A run that wasn't supposed to mean anything. Routine freight. Just another cold night with the mountains whispering along the ridge. The day had started gray, low clouds pressing against the slopes like smoke trapped under glass. I was hauling lumber out of a mill in Wise County, Virginia, heading down toward Chattanooga. It was late December, a bitter time of year. The kind of cold that hums through the cab even with the heat cranked all the way up. You drive long enough, you start to sense the difference between loneliness and solitude. Solitude can be peaceful. The rhythm of tires, the soft hum of the CB radio, the way the world narrows down to a single lane and your own breathing. But loneliness, that's when the silence starts to talk back. I'd been listening to a preacher on the AM dial, something about redemption and wandering souls. Normally I'd have switched the station, but that night I let it play. His voice echoed inside the cab like it was meant for me. I remember him saying, "You can run from your sins, but the road circles back, brother. It always circles back." It was just a line from a radio sermon, but for some reason it stuck to me like static. A few hours later, around 11, I stopped at a rest area just south of Pound Gap, where the highway dips through the spine of the Appalachians. There wasn't much there. 2 vending machines, a flickering security light, a cracked bathroom with peeling paint. The snow was coming down in slow, lazy flakes, the kind that don't look real under sodium lamps. I stepped out to stretch my legs. The air hit like knives. My breath hung white in front of me. That's when I saw him, a man standing off near the tree line. Still, watching. He wasn't dressed for the weather. Just a thin flannel jacket and dark jeans. No hat, no gloves. He didn't move, didn't even shiver. Just stood there, his face half hidden in the shadow of the trees. Now, I've seen plenty of strange folks on the road. Drifters, hitchhikers, people who live out of old campers and wander rest stops like ghosts. Usually you can tell what kind of trouble they're in just by the way they hold themselves. But this man, he didn't look lost. He looked like he was waiting. I called out to him, something like, "Hey, you all right out there?" But he didn't answer, didn't even lift his head. I told myself to leave it alone. Get back in the truck, keep driving. But the snow was picking up, and part of me felt guilty, the kind of guilt that doesn't make sense unless you've been on the road too long, when you start to see bits of yourself in every stranger. So I called out again. He looked up, and in the orange glow of that flickering lamp, I saw his face, calm, pale, eyes the color of slate. He started walking toward me, slow, steady steps through the snow. No sound but the crunch beneath his boots. When he reached the edge of the lot, he stopped. "You heading south?" he asked. His voice was quiet, almost too quiet, like it came from somewhere deep inside a dream. "Yeah," I said. "Chattanooga." He nodded once. "Could I ride with you a while?" I hesitated. Every instinct said no. You don't pick up strangers, not these days, not in the mountains at midnight. But there was something about his tone, not desperate, not threatening, just hollow. "Where are you heading?" I asked. He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Anywhere, away from here." That should have been my sign. But the wind was biting, and I told myself I was doing him a kindness. So I unlocked the passenger door, told him to climb in. He moved carefully, almost reverently, wiping his boots before stepping inside, as if he didn't want to leave a trace. He settled into the seat, folded his hands, and stared straight ahead. I introduced myself, Earl, but he didn't offer his name, just nodded, eyes fixed on the windshield. We drove in silence for a while. The wipers kept time like a metronome. Snow blurred the road ahead into streaks of white. After a few miles, I tried small talk, asked where he was from, if he had family around. Nothing, just the quiet hum of the engine and the faint whistle of wind seeping through the door seals. I figured he was shy, or maybe running from something. Happens more often than you'd think. People vanish into the road, become part of it. But the longer we drove, the heavier that silence felt. Like it wasn't just the absence of words, it was deliberate. A silence that filled the cab, pressed against my chest, made every breath feel shallow. Around midnight, we crossed into Tennessee. The snow turned to freezing rain, tapping against the windshield like fingernails. The headlights carved thin tunnels through the mist. That's when I started noticing little things. He hadn't moved once since he sat down, not even to adjust his seatbelt. His hands were clasped too tight, and every now and then I thought I heard him whispering, not words, just faint murmurs, like someone talking in their sleep. I turned the radio back on, hoping to drown it out, but the station was gone, just static now. He spoke for the first time in over an hour. "You ever lose someone?" he asked. The question came so sudden I almost missed it. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Couple people." He nodded once. "You ever wish you could take something back?" His voice was different this time. Not quiet, but trembling, like it carried too much weight. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. After a long silence, he whispered, "It's worse when it wasn't your fault, because part of you still wonders if maybe it was." Then he went silent again. I felt a chill crawl through me deeper than the cold outside. I didn't remember mentioning anything about loss. Not to him, not to anyone. But something in the way he said it, like he knew, made my stomach twist. A few more miles. The mist thickened. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. "Hey," I said carefully, "you sure you're all right?" No answer. I turned my head slightly. He was staring at me now. Not blinking, not moving, just staring. And in that moment, I realized something that made my throat go dry. The faint smell of wet pine and ash drifting from his clothes. The same smell that used to cling to my old house after it burned. The house I'd left behind 12 years ago, the one my wife died in. For a while, I couldn't breathe. That smell, faint, smoky, wet with the scent of pine resin, hit me like a memory I'd tried too long to bury. It filled the cab, soft at first, then stronger, until I had to roll down the window to let in the freezing air. He didn't move, didn't react, just kept staring ahead, his face caught in the intermittent flash of headlights passing on the opposite lane. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles cracked. The rain hit harder now, sleet hissing off the asphalt, and the road started to twist and climb. I was fighting the curve, trying to keep my focus, but that smell, it wouldn't leave. It was the smell of that night. 12 years ago in a trailer outside of Bryson City, a short circuit, one wrong wire. I'd been out on a job run 2 states away. The fire had started in the bedroom. They said it was fast. They said she probably didn't even wake up. That's what they said. But there were things I never told them. Like the argument we had before I left. The way she said she was tired of me choosing the road over a home. The way I slammed the door and said words you can't unsay. I remember thinking, I'll make it right when I get back. But I never got that chance. And now, here was this man in my cab smelling like smoke and pine. I cleared my throat, tried to sound casual. You, been near a fire or something? He tilted his head slightly, eyes still on the road ahead. There's fire everywhere if you stay long enough, he said. You just stop smelling it after a while. The words chilled me, not because of what he said, but how calm he was saying it. I glanced at the clock, 12:43 a.m., still miles from the next town. The highway narrowed, threading through the hollows. Bare trees clawed at the fog like black ribs. My headlights hit signs half buried in snow. Steep grade ahead, falling rocks. Next gas 38 miles. And then, just as sudden as it started, the smell vanished. Clean air again, just diesel and wet pavement. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe he'd spilled something on his jacket, maybe the cold was messing with my head. The brain does strange things when you're this tired. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the air itself had shifted, like the truck wasn't moving through the mountains anymore, but through something else. Something older. We rode in silence for another 20 minutes before he spoke again. You ever get the feeling, he said softly, that someone's riding with you even when you're alone? I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, yes, I had. Sometimes on long drives, I'd catch movement in the mirror, like someone sitting in the sleeper berth. I'd hear a breath, a whisper of fabric. Once I even swore I heard my name, but I'd always blamed it on exhaustion, on loneliness, on the way the mind tricks itself. But hearing him say it like that, like he'd been there too, made something deep inside me turn cold. He smiled faintly, still not looking at me. You talk to her sometimes, don't you? My hands froze on the wheel. What did you say? He blinked slow, like a man waking from a dream. You talk to her, he repeated, when you're alone, when the road gets too quiet. The air in the cab thickened. I turned my head sharply toward him. How the hell would you know that? He didn't flinch. Because she hears you. The sound of the wipers faded. The world outside seemed to fall away. Just white fog and that humming silence that presses behind your eardrums. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he turned, finally meeting my eyes, and I swear to God, in the dull reflection of the dash lights, his pupils looked like 2 pinpoints of fire. I hit the brakes. The rig skidded slightly, tires hissing on the wet pavement. Get out, I said, my voice shaking. He just looked at me. You shouldn't be angry. You asked for the truth. What truth? He leaned closer, his breath faint and cold as winter air. The truth you buried with her. The truck idled, headlights cutting across the fog. I could see his reflection in the windshield, still, silent, waiting. I don't know who you think you are, I said, but you're getting out now. He smiled again, that same unsettling calm. You don't remember, do you? What you left behind before you drove away? I felt something twist in my stomach, a faint echo of memory I didn't want to touch. Stop, I said. But he kept going, his tone barely above a whisper. She wasn't asleep when it happened. The words hit like a blow. I turned toward him, but the passenger seat was empty. The door was still locked, the seatbelt still buckled. For a second, all I could hear was my own breathing. Heavy, uneven. Then the smell came back, stronger this time. Smoke, charred wood, and under it, something else, something sharp and sweet, like burnt hair. My hands trembled on the wheel. I pulled over to the shoulder, put it in park. The rain had stopped, but the mist outside was so thick it glowed under the lights, swirling like breath. I opened the door, stumbled out into the cold. The night was silent except for the engine's idle. I walked around to the passenger side, like half expecting to see footprints in the slush. There were none. Not a mark. Inside the cab, the seat was still warm. That was when I realized my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't even light a cigarette. I leaned against the truck, staring into the fog, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The highway stretched empty in both directions. No headlights. No sound. Just the whisper of wind slipping through the pines. I thought about calling someone, anyone. But who? What would I even say? There was a man in my truck who knew things he shouldn't, who vanished into thin air. No one would believe that. Hell, I barely believed it myself. After a few minutes, I climbed back into the cab, locked the doors, sat there until my breathing steadied. The air was still heavy, but the smell had faded again. I turned the key, eased back onto the road. The mist began to thin as I descended the mountain grade. The horizon ahead glowed faintly. The edge of dawn, maybe, or a town up ahead. I told myself it was over, that it was just my mind playing tricks, a trick of fatigue, maybe a dream I'd slipped into behind the wheel. But then the CB radio crackled, dead frequency, just static. And through that static, a voice whispered, so faint I almost missed it. "Keep driving, Earl. You're almost home." I froze, because that was her voice, exactly as I remembered it. The voice faded as quick as it came, swallowed by static, but I'd know it anywhere. Soft, warm, with that lilt that always made my name sound gentler than I deserved. "Keep driving, Earl." For a long moment I sat frozen, staring at the radio like it was something alive. My throat was dry, my chest tight. I didn't touch the dial, didn't breathe. Then, just as sudden, silence again. Outside, the world was still black and white and endless. The road unspooled beneath my headlights like a ribbon of ghosts. Every signpost looked like a gravestone, every bend a question I didn't want to answer. I drove for miles without realizing it. My body on autopilot, my mind somewhere between memory and nightmare. The CB stayed quiet, but I could feel her presence in the cab. Not heavy, not threatening. Just there. The way air shifts when someone enters a room you thought was empty. I caught my reflection in the side window, blurred by condensation. Tired eyes, gray stubble, a man carrying too many miles on his face. But behind me, just for a heartbeat, I thought I saw movement, a faint outline in the sleeper berth. I turned quick. Nothing there. Only the blanket folded the way I'd left it, the old coffee thermos rolling gently with the road. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. You can't really describe that kind of fear. It's not the jump scare kind. It's quiet, patient, like someone humming behind a closed door. It doesn't scream, it waits, and somewhere deep down you know what it's waiting for, your confession. The next rest stop came around 3 a.m., just a pull-off near a tunnel entrance with a few sodium lights glowing weakly through the fog. I parked under one of them, engine idling low, and shut my eyes for a second. I told myself I was just tired, that I'd hallucinated the voice, the smell, the stranger, lack of sleep, too much coffee, stress. But then I heard it again. Not through the radio this time, from right behind me. "Why did you leave me?" My heart stopped. It wasn't the stranger's voice. It was hers. I turned slowly, and there she was, sitting on the edge of the sleeper berth, her hair dark and damp like the night it happened. She wasn't burned, not like I'd feared all these years. She looked the way she had the morning I left. Tired eyes, gentle smile. "Sarah," I whispered. She tilted her head slightly, studying me with a sadness that went beyond this world. "You were supposed to be home that night." "I know," I said. My voice cracked. "I know. I called," she said softly. 3 times. My breath hitched. I remembered now. The missed calls I'd ignored sitting at a diner outside Knoxville, too stubborn to answer. "I thought we'd have more time," I said. "I thought." She shook her head, and for the first time I noticed the faint glow beneath her, a dim, ember-colored light flickering like a candle flame. "You can't keep driving forever," she whispered. "The road doesn't forgive what the heart won't face." I blinked hard, tears burning behind my eyes. I didn't mean for it to happen. I swear to God. She leaned forward, her voice almost tender. Then tell me. And in that moment, the truth came out. All the things I'd buried in diesel fumes and truck stop coffee, the guilt that had eaten me alive in quiet miles, the fight we had, the words that cut too deep, the choice to leave that night instead of staying. I told her everything, every word, every regret. When I finished, the cab was silent. The mist outside had thickened so much it looked solid, like the world beyond the windshield had disappeared. She smiled faintly, tears in her eyes that never fell. You carried me too long, Earl. You need to let me go. Her hand reached for mine, cold, weightless, and for a second it was like time stopped. The road, the fog, the years, all folding into one breath, and then she was gone, just gone. The cab was empty again, the seat untouched, the smell of smoke replaced by clean, cold air. Outside, the fog began to lift. The first streaks of dawn touched the ridges, painting them pale blue and silver. I sat there for a long while, staring at the light breaking over the Appalachians, feeling something inside me crack open and drift away. I thought of all the nights I'd driven with that ghost beside me, her memory filling every silence. All the miles I'd put between myself and the truth. And I realized the man I'd picked up wasn't a man at all. He was the road itself, the part of it that never forgets, that listens to what your heart whispers when the engine drowns out everything else. Maybe he was a messenger. Maybe he was a mirror. Maybe he was the echo of what I refused to see. Whatever he was, he'd brought me to this, not punishment but reckoning. I turned off the ignition. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. In that moment, the silence didn't scare me anymore. It felt like release. By the time I started driving again, the sun had cleared the mountaintops. The road ahead glowed gold, steam rising from the wet asphalt like breath. I rolled the window down, let the wind hit my face, and for the first time in years, I felt light. Not forgiven, not yet, but lighter. Somewhere behind me, the CB crackled once more. A faint voice, calm and familiar. Keep driving, Earl. You're almost home. I smiled, a real, tired, grateful smile, and whispered back into the wind, I know. The highway stretched on, winding through the Appalachians, alive with mist and memory. And as I drove, I understood what the old preacher meant that night on the radio. The road does circle back, not to haunt you, but to give you the chance to make peace with what you left behind. I've learned something about the road after 20 years behind the wheel. It doesn't forgive you, and it doesn't forget you either. You can drive 1,000,000 miles and still end up right where you started, staring into the same dark mirror of your mistakes. My name's Ray Mathers, 46 years old, divorced, and still running loads up and down the Appalachian spine. I haul what most drivers won't: hazardous freight, overnight runs through places where the radio goes to static, and the mountains feel like they're leaning in to listen. It pays better, sure. But really, it's the silence I've come to rely on. The hum of the tires is the only thing that still makes sense to me. That night started like any other. I was parked at a diner off Highway 19 near Beckley, West Virginia, just finishing a cup of burnt coffee when a dispatcher I didn't know called me, said he had a special overnight delivery that needed to be moved fast. Double pay, no questions asked, he said. That phrase, no questions asked, should have been my first warning. But when you're behind on child support and the phone keeps ringing from numbers you don't want to answer, double pay sounds a lot like mercy. He gave me the address, a facility outside of a town called Pine Hollow, up a narrow road that didn't show on my atlas, said it was medical freight. Fragile, temperature-sensitive, needed to be in a research site in Kentucky by morning. When I pulled up around midnight, the place didn't look like any lab I'd seen. Chain-link fences, floodlights that flickered like old bulbs in a basement. The guard at the gate didn't talk much, just pointed me to a loading bay. There were 2 men waiting there. No uniforms. They were wearing gloves, and one of them had a clipboard, but no paperwork for me to sign. They loaded the trailer themselves fast. I tried to make small talk, weather, route, the usual, but neither said a word. When they finished, one of them finally looked at me. His eyes were red like he hadn't slept in days. He said, "Keep it sealed. Don't stop. If you hear anything, it's just the air pressure settling." Then he slapped the side of the trailer, and that was that. By the time I hit the open road, the sky had gone ink black. The kind of night where your headlights don't push back the dark so much as carve 2 tunnels through it. The GPS signal kept cutting out, so I went by memory and road signs, weaving through stretches of fog so thick I could barely see my own hood. Appalachia has a way of swallowing sound. It's not just quiet, it's heavy, like the hills are full of breath, holding it, waiting for something. It wasn't long before I noticed the smell. At first, I thought it was diesel leaking somewhere, but it was sweeter than that. Chemical. Cold. If you've ever been around a mortuary or a hospital basement, you'd know it. Formaldehyde. I cracked the window to let in some air, but the fog outside just made it worse, heavy and damp, carrying the scent right back in. I told myself it was medical waste, maybe organ preservation or something like that. Not unusual in this line of work. But then around the second hour, I felt something. A shift. Not in the truck. I know the rhythm of my rig like my own heartbeat, but inside the trailer. It was faint. A low thud, then another, like something bumping against the walls from the inside. I hit the brakes, eased to the shoulder. The sound stopped immediately. I sat there, engine idling, watching the fog curl around the mirrors. Nothing moved. After a minute or two, I told myself it must have been cargo shifting. That's all. Loose straps, maybe. But when I climbed out and walked back to check the seals, I noticed the padlock had condensation all over it, like frost forming where it shouldn't. That smell was stronger now, bleeding out through the metal seams, sharp enough to sting my nose. I stood there in the dark, one hand on the door handle, one voice in my head saying, "Open it," and another saying, "Drive." In the end, I drove. I tried to push it out of my mind, focus on the road, keep my eyes forward, but the mountains at night don't let you forget what's behind you. Every curve, every tunnel, every echo off the guardrail feels like it's repeating something you don't want to hear. By 2 a.m., the CB was dead, and I hadn't seen another set of headlights for almost an hour. I kept telling myself it was just an easy run, mountain solitude, nothing more. But then came that sound again, 3 dull thuds, a pause, then one long scrape down the inside of the trailer wall. That was no cargo shift. I gripped the wheel tighter, felt my palms sweat. The smell was getting unbearable now, that chemical sweetness mixed with something organic, something like old copper and decay. I thought about calling dispatch, but my flip phone had no signal, just a blinking searching on the screen. So I talked to myself the way I sometimes do to keep my nerves steady. Just temperature fluctuation. I said, the air pressure inside the trailer expands, the metal flexes, nothing alive back there. But even as I said it, I knew I didn't believe it. A mile later, I hit a sharp turn where the road narrowed to 1 lane. That's when I heard it again, a single, heavy knock from inside the trailer. Not random this time. 3 beats, slow, measured, like someone or something trying to signal. I don't know how long I kept driving after that. Minutes, maybe hours. All I know is that the road eventually dropped into a valley where the fog broke and the moonlight spilled across an old rest area that looked half abandoned. The lights were out, but there was a single vending machine glowing by the bathroom building. I pulled in, parked the rig, and sat there with the engine idling. The smell hit me harder now that I wasn't moving. My eyes watered, my stomach turned. I had to get out, get air, get distance, get away. When I stepped down from the cab, the night air was cold and still. I could hear the insects humming somewhere out in the trees. But underneath that sound, I thought I heard something else. Faint, rhythmic, like breathing through a wall. I froze. It was coming from the trailer. I took a few steps back, watching as my taillights glowed red against the steel doors. Then the metal flexed. Just slightly. A bulge, like pressure pushing from the inside. It held for a moment. Then went still again. I wanted to run. Every instinct said, get in the cab and drive until the sun comes up, but I'd been a driver too long to leave something dangerous behind. So I walked up to the door, one slow step at a time, and pressed my ear to the cold surface. It was silent for a few seconds. Then, right next to where my head rested, a voice whispered, not a word, just a breath. And it wasn't mine. That sound, that soft exhale through steel, froze me where I stood. I waited, listening. The fog had crept back down from the trees, thick enough that the red glow from my taillights blurred into a bleeding smear against the metal. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, but nothing else. After a moment, I backed away, hands shaking without me realizing it. Just pressure, I muttered, like saying it out loud would make it true. Just the damn air inside settling. But I couldn't explain how that breath had fogged the steel. A faint patch of condensation bloomed right where my ear had been. It lingered, then slowly faded. I climbed back into the cab and slammed the door. Locked it. Sat there staring at the steering wheel, breathing through my mouth to block the smell that had somehow followed me inside. The clock on the dash said 2:47 a.m. Still hours until dawn. I told myself I'd make it to Kentucky without stopping again. Whatever was happening back there, real or not, I'd deal with it when I dropped the load. That's what truckers do. We keep moving. We keep the promise. So I shifted into gear and rolled back onto the highway. The road ahead wound tight through the mountains, black ribbon threading through hollow after hollow. No cars, no lights, only the hum of the engine and the rattle of the trailer behind me. For a while, that sound was steady, familiar. Then I started to notice the rhythm changing. There was a drag now, a faint scrape that rose and fell like something shifting its weight, crawling from one side of the trailer to the other. Each time I hit a curve, it shifted again, keeping balance like it knew how the road bent. That's when I realized it wasn't random, it was following the turns. The thought hit me hard, that whatever was inside wasn't cargo. It was aware. I pressed harder on the gas. The rig shuddered as it climbed another grade, the gears whining. In the mirror, the fog swallowed everything behind me. It looked like I was driving into nothingness, like the whole world had shrunk to the size of my headlights. I tried to distract myself, turned on the CB, but it was still dead air. Then I flipped on the old cassette player. The tape clicked once and played half a verse of Johnny Cash before warping into static. Then something, a voice, cut through. It wasn't the song. It wasn't radio bleed. It said my name, whispered, drawn out, like someone dragging breath through water. Ray! I yanked the cord from the cassette deck and threw it onto the passenger seat. The cab fell silent again, except for the engine's low groan. I started talking to myself just to keep my head straight. Stress. You're tired, that's all. You've done night runs before. You're just tired. But part of me knew better. This wasn't exhaustion. It was something else. Something that had climbed inside the quiet and made a home there. Around 3:30, I reached a narrow stretch with a bridge over the river gorge. Half the guardrail was missing, twisted from some old wreck long forgotten. Halfway across, I felt the trailer lurch, a violent jolt like something slammed into the inside wall. The whole rig swayed. For a split second, I thought it might tip. I fought the wheel, pulled over on the other side, heart pounding so hard it felt like a second engine in my chest. The smell hit me again, thicker, heavier, and under it, something new, a wet, coppery tang. Blood. That was it. I had to know. I climbed out, flashlight in hand, boots crunching on gravel. The fog off the river was cold enough to sting my face. The rear doors loomed in front of me, tall, streaked with dew. The padlock was still in place, frosted. But when I looked closer, I saw something that hadn't been there before. Scratches. Long, deep grooves carved into the metal from the inside. I stumbled back a step, light trembling in my hand. That's when I heard it, a soft thump followed by a dragging noise. Then silence. My body wanted to run, but my brain was too slow to follow. I stood there until the silence became unbearable, then whispered through the metal like a fool. Hello? Something answered. A single knock, and then a voice low and wrong like a broken speaker. Let me out. I ran. I don't even remember getting back in the cab, but the next thing I knew, I was flooring it down the highway, hands white on the wheel. The trailer rattled behind me, every bump in the road sounding like something alive slamming against the walls. I didn't care about the load, the contract, the money. Nothing mattered except putting distance between me and that voice. But here's the thing about the Appalachian backroads. They don't always lead you out. Sometimes they just circle you around until you end up right where you began. I drove for what felt like hours, no signs, no exits, just fog and curves and that smell that clung to my clothes like smoke. When I finally saw headlights up ahead, I almost cried with relief. A small gas station, old, flickering lights, gravel lot, looked closed, but I didn't care. I needed to stop. I pulled in, left the engine running, and stumbled out. The cold air hit me like a slap. I leaned against the door, trying to steady my breathing. That's when I noticed something strange. The trailer, it was quiet, no movement, no scraping, just silence. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe the sound, the smell, even the voice, maybe they were all just the road playing tricks on a tired mind. I even laughed, a short, cracked sound. Then I saw the puddle beneath the doors. It wasn't oil, it was darker, thicker. It spread slow across the gravel, catching the light in deep red glints. I took a step back, and the padlock clicked, all on its own. I didn't touch it, didn't breathe, just stared. The shackle quivered, then turned halfway like invisible fingers twisting it. And from inside, a low groan began, soft at first, then rising until it became a chorus of whispers pressed against steel. My flashlight flickered. I stumbled backward toward the cab. My boots slipped in the dark puddle, and when I hit the ground, the light beam swung across the trailer wall, revealing something written there in streaks of black-red fluid. "Thank you for the ride." I got up and ran. Didn't think, didn't look back. I jumped into the cab, slammed the door, and peeled out of that lot, gravel spraying in the headlights. My pulse was a roar in my ears. I didn't stop to check the mirrors. I didn't want to see what might be crawling out of that trailer. I just drove. Up through the switchbacks, down through hollows, until the first gray light of dawn started to break over the ridge. And then the smell was gone. Just like that. No chemical, no decay, only clean, cold mountain air pouring in through the vents. For a second, I almost believed it was over, until I looked down at my hands. There were fingerprints, faint, dark smudges, all over my sleeves, my wrists, my steering wheel. Small. Human. And they weren't mine. The morning came like it didn't want to. Gray light bleeding slow through a haze that looked more like smoke than fog. My rig creaked as it rolled down the last stretch of highway, tires thudding over uneven asphalt. I hadn't slept. I hadn't even blinked much. But I kept driving, because stopping meant thinking, and I couldn't afford that yet. The map said I was close to the Kentucky border, near some old mining towns I'd never heard of. The directions from dispatch had gone fuzzy in my head, but I remembered the name. Ridgevale Research Facility. No sign for it anywhere, but after a while, a dirt road split off from the main route. The gravel looked freshly turned. There was a hand-painted sign nailed to a post, black letters on whiteboard, authorized delivery only. I turned down it. The trees pressed in tight, branches scraping against the trailer roof like fingernails. The smell was back again. Faint but sharp, like memory itself had a scent. By the time the facility came into view, the sun had climbed over the ridge, but it didn't feel like morning. It felt like aftermath. The place looked abandoned. Faded government lettering on the gates, chain link rusted through, guard booth empty. A line of buildings sat beyond the fence, low, windowless, made of concrete and time. I honked once, nothing. Twice, still nothing. Then the gate creaked open on its own. I don't know what made me drive inside. Habit, maybe. That sense of duty that gets burned into you after years of doing the job, even when your gut tells you to turn back. I parked beside the loading bay. The padlock on the trailer was still hanging loose from whatever unseen hand had turned it in the night. And that puddle beneath the doors, dried but leaving a stain. The silence around me was heavy again, like the world was holding its breath. Somewhere off in the trees, a crow cawed, a sound too loud, too sharp, breaking the stillness in half. I stepped out of the cab. My legs felt weak, like I was walking underwater. I called out, "Delivery for Ridgevale Research," but my voice just echoed and died. Then a door opened across the yard. A man in a lab coat stepped out, shielding his eyes from the weak sun. He looked older, maybe in his 60s, hair gone thin, face pale like parchment. He walked up slow, glancing at the trailer, then at me. "You're late," he said. "Ran into fog," I replied. He didn't smile. Didn't even blink. "Let's get it unloaded." I followed him to the back. He didn't ask for paperwork, didn't check my name, just motioned for me to open the doors. I hesitated. My fingers hovered over the latch. The metal was cold, slick with condensation again, even though the morning was dry. When I looked closer, I saw something etched into the frost, faint lines like fingertips dragging down the surface from the inside. "You might want to stand back," I said quietly. He didn't move. So I pulled the latch and swung the doors open. The smell hit us both like a wave. Formaldehyde, rot, and something else. Something alive. Inside, there were 6 large containers, metal coffins sealed tight, each with a cloudy window in the lid. One of them had cracked. The glass was splintered, the seal broken, and the liquid inside had half drained, leaving streaks down the interior. I stepped closer. The man didn't stop me. Inside that broken container, something was curled. Small, gray, the size of a child maybe, skin slick and wrong like wax half melted. The eyes, if they were eyes, were open, and they moved. I stumbled backward. "What the hell is that?" The old man sighed like he'd been waiting for that question. "A project that should have stayed buried," he said. "We were moving them for disposal. Didn't expect them to. Respond." "Respond?" I repeated. "You mean move?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped up to the container and pressed his hand against the glass. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then that thing inside pressed its hand back. I couldn't breathe. The smell, the memory of the voice in the trailer, it all came crashing back at once. That thing spoke to me," I said. The old man turned, finally meeting my eyes. His face looked like stone. "They don't speak," he said. "They remember." He walked back toward the building, waving me to follow, but I didn't move. My eyes were locked on that container, and the faint shapes of condensation forming words on the inside of the glass. "Drive safe, Ray." I ran. Left him there, left the truck, left everything. I don't even remember getting back to the highway, just the sound of gravel under my tires and my own heartbeat echoing inside my skull. The radio came alive again halfway through the valley. Static at first, then a voice, my dispatcher. "Ray, you there? You delivered?" I didn't answer. He tried again. "Ray, you okay?" There was a pause, then he said something that froze me all over again. "Hey, weird thing, man. I don't have any record of that run. No invoice, no dispatch order. You sure you got that call from us?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, because I realized the number that had called me wasn't saved in my contacts. And when I checked my call log, it wasn't there anymore. Just blank space. The miles rolled under me in silence. Somewhere past the state line, I pulled off at a rest area and sat there until the sun was high enough to make the world look normal again, but it never felt normal. When I finally stepped out to stretch, I noticed something on the trailer's rear doors. The frost was back, thin, glimmering under the light, and beneath it, a handprint, smaller than mine, pressed from the inside. I wiped it away and stood there for a long time, staring at my reflection in the metal. My face looked different, older, like I'd left a part of myself back on that mountain road, sealed up with whatever was in those containers. Sometimes when I'm running the night routes, I catch myself glancing in the mirrors, expecting to see headlights that aren't there. And every once in a while, when the road gets quiet enough, too quiet, I hear it again. That breath. Right behind me. People ask why I still drive nights, why I keep to the mountains, the back roads, the places where the fog swallows the world whole. I tell them it's because I like the peace. But the truth, I think I'm still waiting for that call, that voice on the other end offering double pay for another special overnight delivery. Because some roads, once you've taken them, they don't ever let you off.